Yeah, Steve, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your day and joining us here to hopefully have a great conversation around technology and education. And we look forward to kind of having the opportunity to maybe see you again this summer at a conference that David is going to present at. Or that David is organizing. But boy, that was quite the impressive list of things that David just rattled off there. But let's kind of take you a little back before all of those things, right? What has inspired you to kind of take on the hat and the role of an educator?
Well, as a kid, I always wanted to be a history teacher, right? That was always kind of one of my original plans. And so, I joined the Army in part to pay for school, in part because my father had been in the service. And so I wanted to serve as well. And it's, when you look at that, when I was in college and high school, I wasn't necessarily a huge technology person. We had computers and the Apple IIs and all that sort of stuff, and didn't do much for me. But when I went through the infantry mortar platoon officers course at Fort Benning, and they started giving us the mortar ballistic computer to use, I'm figuring, oh, wow, if they're going to give technology to infantrymen, it is time to learn something about technology, right? And so between that and the instructional design courses at the University of Iowa that I took as part of my master's, that kind of drove me then into the instructional technology world. And I ended up getting a doctorate in education in instructional technology from Northern Illinois, and really saw, hey, this is the way the future is coming. We've been doing that for a long time, right? Every new technology is going to solve the world's problems. I particularly like it when, Thomas Edison and McCluskey talked about the fact that by the end of the 1920s, they'd have to use the Army to keep these kids out of school at night, because they were going to just be so excited for educational film that, they wouldn't be able to just go home. They'd have to stay there, and that would get rid of all textbooks. So we've heard this a couple of times before, but it never, there's always a little more balance there about where we go with technology. And that's the key, I think, is keeping some sort of balance there.
And sometimes it's just the tool then that kind of changes, right? It was film at one time, it's calculator, another time. And now maybe it's a little bit even more AI. But yeah, there's always kind of this build up, this anticipation, I think, that comes with that.
I think it is. It's because it's new, right? It's the the hype cycle. We're all excited about it. It's to solve the world's problems, and then we kind of go down, and it kind of levels off, and we just have to realize that's a constant, sort of, in our society today.
And Steve, so like for our region, Jeremy's in a different region than myself, but we both work with a lot of different schools, and so typically, like, I work with a lot of superintendents, for example, and I always feel like each school and superintendent approaches things differently in a variety of areas, right? But even, for my purposes and what I'm helping them with, tech integration is always approached differently, and some are much more, maybe more inclined to adopt some technology innovations, and some maybe not so much. So for you, when you were the superintendent, and you had those accolades that came about, like the tech savvy superintendent, what were the things that you were doing with tech integration at the district level that kind of earned you those accolades, or how did you approach it?
Well, I think the approach is really the most important thing, right? And it's the issue of stepping back and make sure that for everything that you're doing, there is an instructional or an administrative imperative, right? When I was a assistant soup for technology or tech director before that, every time a new tool would come out, you get people going, hey, I got to have this. And people would occasionally go, well, why aren't you excited about it? I said, well, I haven't figured out how we're going to use it instructionally yet. Right. And so, you got to focus on what's the actual mission of the organization, which is, generally speaking, to provide efficient and effective instruction. Right. And so everything should drive towards that. My very first tech plan ever just asked two questions. Basically, what would you like to do with your students right now that you can't? And then what are the administrative processes that currently impact your ability to focus on instructional things, right? And teachers responded. And one thing I was lucky, I always got good response rates from the surveys that I did, and I still survey people a lot. You've all probably gotten surveys from me recently about, AI and education. But after I did the survey, I would always feed the information that we gathered back to the staff, and so that they would be able to see it and see that we were actually going to work and move forward based on their feedback. And I think that was always very helpful, because I'd have other administrators going, I survey people, they don't respond. I'm like, well, we work really hard to say, hey, thank you for your information. This is how we're going to use it. But that key is having that ability there to really, say, this is what we're doing, and have a plan. Make sure everybody knows what the plan is, and make sure that there's a roadmap that everybody can kind of follow.
Yeah, it seems like you're kind of, being very transparent with the direction that you're going, but also very intentional, right? And I think if people are able to see, where you're trying to get to, and the path and the steps that it takes to get there, I think that really helps to bring those people on board. So, would you say that then is a key thing to help kind of build those initiatives successfully to help scale technology within a district, to get the buy-in from, the concerned groups, the stakeholders that are going to be affected by its outcomes?
Well, yes. And you always want to, if possible, especially at senior leadership levels, be very clear, set goals up front. So for instance, when we went to one-to-one devices, a little over a decade ago, I gave the teachers who were going to be the pilot group about an 18-month window, right? And said, hey, here's what we're planning. I had already had the IT folks kind of doing their work to make sure that, we were going to have the necessary bandwidth improved and things like that, so that by the time we actually got there, they'd had, a good 6 months of experience working with the devices in class sets and other ways. They'd had the PD they wanted. They'd been able to go to conferences. And with the board, we'd been very clear, hey, these are what our expectations are. Because if you don't set your expectations up front, then no matter how it ends up, people are going to spin it one way or the other, right? Either, oh, that was great, you had 70% improvement. Well, we were looking for 80, right? And so you have to have kind of very clear goals right up front of how you're going to measure things too, I think helps. But the more time frame you can give them, and I know other districts where the IT director found out they were going to go to one-to-one when the iPads actually showed up on the loading dock, because the superintendent wanted to say, hey, we have one-to-one devices, but there'd been absolutely no planning involved. And obviously that was not a successful iteration, right? That the planning is just essential.
I think I came from an experience similar to what you described, right? And our district was talking about going, and this was when I was back in the classroom, and our district was talking about going one-to-one iPads also. And it was very much a process of where teachers, I think I had the device myself because I was asked to be one of those leaders, the ones that are going to help drive the learning that the staff will need to go through first. And I probably had it about 18 months before a student ever touched one. And then after I had it for about a half a year, then that one following school year, it went to all of the different staff got it, and they got, adept at using them. And I think at the same time, finding the way that it will become that instructional tool, not just, hey, we want to rush to get these in to people's hands because it's the latest fad, but, trying to find ways to prep the staff, make sure they're ready, and then, it'll be a much more seamless and successful rollout to students. Not that there's not going to be bumps in things you're going to have to adjust to along the way, but I think it became the blueprint that I think others tried to follow as well.
Yeah, no, there are always going to be bumps along the road, right? With any plan. And so the key there is just making sure that as you do it, you have a good process for who's going to intervene, right? Who to go for help.